Hi, and welcome to the CSE Innovations Highlights podcast. For those who don't listen to us regularly, this is a monthly podcast that trawls through the Zscaler feature release notes and highlights any features that are particularly interesting from a admin experience, usability, or security perspective. This month, I have two guests with me. I have Vibati.
Hey Alex.
Hey, Vibati, thanks for being on. And Xiaohua. Hello, Xiaohua.
Hi, Alex.
Thank you for being on. So, as usual, my guests have picked out features that they think are particularly interesting to talk about. There's not a ton of them this month, so it will be a pretty quick episode. Xiaohua, I believe you are going first with a couple of ZIA features, so if you want to go ahead and talk about those.
Yeah, the first feature I want to talk about is called a Zscaler URL Category test. One of the most common challenges during ZI deployment or even just the day-to-day policy management is answering a simple question. Is my URL filtering policy actually working the way I think it is? Traditionally, the only way to test was to either visit a real website in that category, which is obviously not ideal if you are testing gambling or adult content, or just to trust that policy is configured correctly and hope for the best. Either of those is a great answer. That is exactly the problem Zscaler URL category test page resolves. Zscaler hosts the test URLs at zscaler.com, and each URL path mapped to a specific category. So video streaming is pre-classified as video streaming, gambling as gambling, and so on. That are safe. Zscaler owned pages, no extra content, no risk. So what are the real use case here? First, policy validation during deployment. When you are rolling out your filtering rules for the first time, you want to confirm the block actually blocking, caution is actually cautioning, and allowing actually is allowing before you go live. You assign the policy to yourself with the test URL for that category, and you immediately see the outcome. Block page, policy is working, test page loads, and it's allowing. Check that it's intentional. Second, troubleshooting user-reported instance. A user says they are being blocked from something they shouldn't be or getting through something they shouldn't. Instead of asking them to reproduce on a sensitive site, you replicate the category behaviors yourself using the test URL. It's safe, controlled, and repeatable. Thirdly, maybe ongoing policy audit. As the policy evolve over time, new policy added, exceptions piled up. It's easy for things to drift from original intent. So periodically running through these test URLs for your key categories give you a quick sanity check that your policy posture is actually aligned with what business actually wants. So it's a small feature, but it's one of the things that make policy management significantly less of just a guessing game.
Yeah, and that's good, obviously, right? Because it means that if you are an admin and you are configuring your policy and you're not sure if your rules are applying to a specific user or group or in the right order or whatever, like it's a single tool that's easy to access that lets you test all the URL categories that way. So no, definitely a good feature for admins. It'll make your life or their lives easier rather when they're configuring their rules. And then I think your next one was a browser isolation feature.
Yeah, the browser isolation feature is another one would recommend. So one piece of the feedback we hear from customer around zero trust browser isolation was, I have no idea if I'm actually in isolation session or not. This enhancement directly address that. So first, as the page is loading, a static message appears in the center of the screen, confirming the session is being isolated, and animated green outline pulse around the browser border. So even before the page full loads, the user exactly know what's happening. Second, once the page is fully rendered, a notification banner appears in the upper right corner. This banner can be customized by the domain, so you can tailor the title, message, whatever you want to match to your organization's language. User can click show me more to read the full message. And third, a floating check mark icon appears once the page is fully loaded and stays visible even after the banner disappears. So the key value here is transparency and a trust. User are no longer guessing whether isolation is working or not. Admin get customization touch point to enforce company message right at the moment user entered a protected session.
And this will also, I think, help with users wondering why they suddenly can't copy or paste from their browser because they haven't noticed they're in an isolation session, right? If you have those controls configured for browser isolation, then at least now it's very obvious that you're in an isolation session, and they can at least realize that the no copy pasting or downloading policy is part of the isolation policy. Thank you, Shahwa, for those features. Vibati, then I think you're up next with a data protection feature, a couple of data protection features, actually, if I remember correctly. So. The
That's
floor is
right, Alex.
yours.
This update is about the NSS support for third-party app governance and posture management logs. So just some context here, Zscaler posture management for SaaS applications, it monitors and governs the SaaS platforms for risky misconfigurations and compliances. Now, third-party app governance, it takes it a step ahead and helps us discover and govern risks associated with the third-party apps and extensions to those primary SaaS applications. Now, while the third-party app governance dashboard is itself very rich in visibility and policies to govern these risks, the NSS would take it a step ahead in streaming these real-time risk governance events from Zscaler into your respective SIEM solutions. And it will basically give security teams a unified visibility and correlation for risks associated with not just the primary SaaS applications, but also their extensions. So definitely very feature-rich enhancement.
That makes a lot of sense and definitely valuable data to get in your SIEM. Is there a limit to how many NSS feeds you can configure for this?
Yes, so you can configure up to 8 TCP nanolog streaming service feeds for this.
Perfect. And then I think you had a second DLP feature as well.
That is correct. So we all know that one of the key benefits of Zscaler DLP is the ability to leverage the same DLP dictionaries and engines across various channels, such as inline, endpoint, email, SaaS, and even your cloud hosted platforms. We now have introduced the ability to select the specific channels for which we want to apply DLP engine to be applicable. And this basically brings in a lot of efficiency while defining DLP policies. So we are only shown the applicable DLP engines while configuring channel-specific policies. And it would eventually also help in reducing false positives that would come from certain engines being on unwanted channels unknowingly. So probably just to give you guys an example, let's say an admin scopes the predefined PCI engine, which is to trigger on credit cards and SSN information to inline web and email DLP alone. And they would want to exclude endpoint and CASB for these channels. Might be because they are being governed by other relevant controls, right? So now with this new feature, we would have the ability to select inline web and email DLP as channels while editing this predefined PCI engine. How effective is that?
Right, and this is also, I think, going to help admins with the amount of work they had to do to create engines and dictionaries, right? So in the past, if you wanted to have an engine that applied only certain controls to a certain channel, you'd have to go and create a different engine that only checked for that data type and not other data types, right? So now you can just create your engines as necessary and then just define which engines apply to which streams directly. So definitely a good update. Thank you, Vibati. And then I think we're back to Shawa for a very quick ZPA feature.
Yeah. In previous episode, we covered about OAuth 2.0 enrollment support coming to App Connector. Actually, if you caught that, you already understand the core value. We're moving away from static credential for enrolling that Zscaler component and replacing that with a more secure, modern token-based authentication flow. This release is simply that same capacity extended to 3 more components: network connector, private service ad, and private cloud controller. If you are running a full ZPA deployment, you can now enroll all of your core infrastructure components consistently using OAuth 2.0. No more mixing, matching authentication method depending on what component you're setting up. For security posture standpoint, it's a meaningful step. It eliminates a static credential across the board for this enrollment workflow, which reduces your attack surface and align with the zero trust principles, even at infrastructure layers. If you already roll out OAuth enrollment for App Connector, extending it to these more thick components should feel very familiar. Same approach, broader coverage.
Right, and that obviously has a lot of value, as you mentioned, from a security standpoint, and also from an ease of enrolling those services and deploying them as an admin. Thank you, Xiaohua, for that. And then I think our last feature is a ZDX feature, and it's back to Vibati.
Yes, so this feature is about the Rerun Job command now available in device remediation in ZDX. So we all know that scripts in ZDX are very helpful in remediating software issues by running PowerShell scripts on the selected devices. The Rerun Job command takes it a step forward and now allows you to rerun a completed remediation job with the exact same configuration in one click from the job details page. And it basically would preserve the original script, selected devices or groups, and any parameter values. And very relatable example to this would be that let's say you ran a clear DNS cache against a group of 250 Windows devices, wherein 230 succeeded and 20 jobs failed because maybe the devices were offline. Now you can open that job's details and initiate a rerun job. And over there, the ZDX pre-selects the same 250 targets and the domain parameters you set earlier. It will just create a new run command saying clear DNS cache copy and executes when devices are available. So definitely very useful for the ZDX admins.
Right, and I think that was actually, a pain point that was surfaced as part of that. Is just it's if you are managing a lot of devices via the ability to run scripts remotely for the ZDX, it can get complicated to do that, especially for repeat tasks. So no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think again that's a good improvement, even if it's not a very large improvement. So with that, we have reached our last feature for this month's episode. So Vibati, thank you for coming on and talking about your features.
Thank you.
And Xiaohua, thank you for coming on and talking about your features.
Thanks, Alex.
And thank you to everybody for listening. We'll see you in next month's episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.